Alright, our DLO for today is I will get more practice in solving equations for single variables. And notice here that my title got a little bit cut off, so it just says VAR, but it means variables. Just like we talked about in class, our notes need to be very, very readable. So we're going to make all of our notes look exactly the same. So your notes should look exactly like my notes. So the very first line says DLO, I will get more practice in solving equations for single variables. Our date needs to go on this page right up here in this corner, so it should say September 8th, 2014 or 9/8/14. The next line down should be the page that we got this out of our packets. So this is out of packet A2, page 42. That's what we're working on today. So the first line is the DLO, you got the date. The second line is the place where we're getting this information from so that we can always refer back to this information. And we'll go ahead and get started. Now when you're taking your notes, I don't want you to write them over here, and then write a bunch over here, and then write a bunch over here. We're going to make them all so that they look exactly the same, that they're neat, that they're in order, and that you have all of the steps written and answers boxed. So we're going to start over here on the left-hand side, and every time we do a new step, we're just going to move down the lines, all right? We're not moving across the page, we're moving down the lines. If we get to the very bottom of this page and we run out of room, then you can go up and start a new column. But we're not moving across the page. We're numbering every single one of our examples as we go down, so make sure that you are doing the same and following along. Every once in a while I'll zoom out of my papers so you guys can see again to make sure that all of them look exactly the same. For now, let's get started. So the first example that we're going to do, we're working from this page in your packet. It says solving for y and other variables. And we're going to do just a few problems off this page because it's a review of what we've been doing in the past. And I know that you guys have trouble a lot of times with the fraction problems. So we're going to work on this one, number 4. So write number 4. This is example number 1. So right here I'm going to put example number 1, just like that. So right here on your paper you should have example number 1, just like I have written. And I'm going to write 1/4 x minus 5/8 y equals 1. And again, you should write yours just like mine. It takes up one line. If you need to take up 2 lines, that's fine, but it should be neat, just like this. Now, the directions say to solve each equation for y. All right? So I want to go ahead and make sure that I know what those directions are. So right over here to the right of the problem, I'm going to write in parentheses, solve for y. Alright, so we don't need this paper anymore. I'm going to set this over to the side. So yours should look exactly like mine does. Alright, if we remember our steps from last week in class, if we're going to solve for y, we need to isolate y. We need to get y by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and circle y because that's what I need to isolate. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of any other terms that are on the same side as y. So remember, a term is anything separated by a plus or minus sign. So negative 5/8 y, that's one term. 1/4 x, that's another term. And 1, that's our third term. So there are 3 terms in this equation. The one that's on the same side as y that we want to get rid of is this 1/4 x. So I will subtract 1/4 x from the left-hand side. And because of the subtraction property of equality, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to subtract 1/4 x from the left, subtract 1/4 x from the right, and draw a line underneath it. Now let's make sure that we're all clear on what step that was. So we were getting rid of the 1/4 x term. So that was the subtraction property of equality. The reason is because I want to isolate my negative 5/8 y. So let's write over here, get rid of extra terms. Get rid of extra terms. All right. So over here, 1/4 x and negative 1/4 x, those are additive inverses, so those are going to add to 0. So on this side, these will simplify out to 0. I'm left with negative 5 5/8 y equals 1 and negative 1/4 x are not like terms because this one has an x and this one does not. So I cannot combine those, so I'm just going to write them right next to each other. 1 minus 1/4 x. Just like that. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to get rid of this negative 5/8 that is in front of y. So in order to do that, how I'm going to get rid of it is I can do a couple different things. I could multiply everything by 8 to get rid of my denominator because I don't want that denominator down there. And that would help me out with this 4 as well because the 8 and the 4 would simplify. So that's one way of doing it. All right. I think for this problem specifically, that might be an easier way of doing it. So we're going to go ahead and do it that way. Another way you could do it, just to do it in one step instead of two, is you could just multiply by the reciprocal of what's in front of y. So you could multiply by negative 8 over 5. The problem with that is I feel sometimes that students forget what to do with the negative 8 over 5, so we're going to do it in two steps just to make sure it's clear. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the left side by 8, because that's what's in the denominator, so I'm trying to get rid of that denominator. And I'm going to multiply the right side by 8. This is the multiplicative property of equality. So I can multiply 8 by one side, I can multiply 8 by the other side. So right here I have 8 in the top, 8 in the bottom, so those are going to simplify to 1. Those are multiplicative inverses. And I have negative 5y equals, on the right hand side, my 8 can get distributed, all right, to both of these terms, because remember there are two terms inside of this, so I have to use the distributive property. This time the 8's in the back of the distribution, but it still works the same way. So I multiply 8 times 1, positive 1, and that gives me positive 8. And then I can multiply 8 times a negative 1/4. 8 times negative 1/4. Well, you can think of 1/4 like dividing by 4, because whenever you have 4 in the denominator, you can think of it like dividing. So you can think of this as 8 divided by 4. If that's too confusing for you, you can just multiply the numerators, just like you would in normal fractions. So 8 times 1 is 8, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. That's another way of thinking of it. Just make sure you keep track of this negative, because there's a negative in front. We have to keep that with our problem. So this is negative 2, because negative 8 divided by 4 is 2. X. Don't forget that we have that x there. That x always has to stay with this term. So because we simplified the 1/4 and the 8 to 2, we need to make sure we bring that x down with it. All right, so that property was, if we got rid of the extra terms, we're trying to get rid of the denominator. So I'm just going to write get rid of denominator. Now again, remember, your notes are looking exactly like my notes, so you should have these exact same steps with these exact same words in your notes. So it says negative 5y equals 8 minus 2x. If we divide both sides by negative 5, because I'm trying to isolate my y still, I want to get y all by itself, so I divide by negative 5, because again, it's negative and it's a 5, so these are now multiplicative inverses. And because of the division property of equality, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to divide by negative 5 over here, and I get these to cancel, and I get y on this side. And when I divide by negative 5 over here, you again have to be careful because there's two terms to divide by. So we have to divide 8 by negative 5, and we have to divide negative 2x by negative 5. So 8 divided by negative 5, well, that doesn't go in evenly, so let's just leave it exactly like that. 8 divided by negative 5. That's okay to leave it like that. Negative 2x divided by negative 5. Again, the 2 and the 5 aren't going to simplify at all. Their negatives will simplify because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So this is plus 2 over 5x, or 2x over 5. You can write it either way. 2 over 5x or 2x over 5, because those are the same thing. You're just multiplying by x. So this last step, all right, we were trying to get rid of the coefficient. So get rid of coefficient. And then we're going to put a box around our answer. And so here, let's review our steps one more time. We had 1/4 x minus 5/8 y equals 1. Now we did not want that 1/4 x there, so I got rid of both of the 1/4 x's by subtracting 1/4 x from both sides. So on this side, it got rid of it because we were trying to get rid of that extra term that was on the same side as y. So I brought it over to the other side. These were not like terms, so I had to keep them separate from each other. Then I wanted to get rid of the denominator, so I multiplied both sides by 8. Multiply by 8 here, multiply by 8 here. So those were multiplicative inverses, so those canceled out to 1. We got negative 5y. And then over here I distributed the 8 to both of these terms because there were two terms. So 8 times 1 was 8, and 8 divided by 4 was negative 2x, because we have the negative here and we have the x attached to that term. Then we wanted to get rid of the coefficient, so we divided by negative 5. So we have y all by itself on this side. 8 divided by negative 5 was the same thing, 8 divided by negative 5. And negative 2x divided by negative 5 was positive 2x over 5, or 2/5 x. All right, so again, make sure your paper looks exactly like mine. Your note should look exactly like mine. All right, example number 2. We're just going to do one more in this notes for today, and this one will go a little bit faster. Let's choose one from the second section. How about 17? I like 17. It says 4r equals 7 minus 9s. So let's go ahead and write that down. So this is example number 2. Make sure yours looks exactly like this. And we're going to write 4r equals 7 minus 9s. And we're trying to solve for s. That's what it said in our directions. Solve for s. All right, so we'll circle our variable. Just like up above, we want to get rid of any extra terms. Actually, let me bring this down so we can model our equations after each other. So I want to circle my variable. I want to get rid of any extra terms. So just like I got rid of 1/4 x on this side, the extra term that's on the same side of the equation as the s, right? Negative 9s is one term, 7 is its own term, and 4r is its own term. So there are 1, 2, 3 different terms. The one that's on the same side of the equation as the s that we need to get rid of is the 7. So the subtraction property of equality says I can subtract 7 from both sides. And again, let's get rid of extra terms. All right, so 4r minus 7, those are not like terms, so we cannot combine those because this one has an r and this one does not. So I'm just going to keep it as 4r minus 7. 7 and negative 7 add to 0 because those are additive inverses, so I'm going to cross those off, and I have negative 9s. All right, our next step was to get rid of the denominator. Well, there is no denominator in this problem, so we don't have to worry about that. We get to skip that step. And the last step is to get rid of the coefficient. So the number in front of s is negative 9, and it's being multiplied times s. It's negative 9 times s. So I'll divide by it on both sides because of the division property of equality. All right, get rid of coefficient. All right, so let's simplify this side first because it's easy. Negative 9 divided by negative 9, those are multiplicative inverses, so those add to 1, so we're just left with s. And then on the right-hand side, remember again, we need to have this negative 9 go to both of these terms. So 4 divided by 9, that doesn't simplify at all. So I'll keep it as 4r divided by negative 9. That's this first term. And then I also have to divide negative 9 with negative 7. So it's a negative 7 divided by a negative 9, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So it's positive 7 over 9. And again, that doesn't simplify at all, so we can just leave it alone. So I'll put a box around these two answers, or this answer I should say, and that is my answer for today. Now if I zoom out, you guys can see what my page of notes looks like. All right, that's all we're going to do for today is 2 examples in our notes. All right, the rest of the worksheet looks very, very similar to these 2 examples, so make sure that you know these. Tomorrow, as soon as you get to class, I'm going to have you do a little quiz on one of these 2 examples, so make sure you know how to do both of them. I can't promise which one it will be, but one of these 2 examples will be on a quiz for tomorrow. That's all for today. Make sure you guys have these written down. We'll see you then.